March 1st of 2026 marked the 25th anniversary for the initial 2001 Japanese launch of the classic PlayStation 2 mech title, Zone of the Enders. This almost immediately entered the realm of cult classic as it spawned a Game Boy Advance spin-off and then not only a sequel called Zone of the Enders: The Second Runner, but also a set of video media as well. That'd be the Sunrise Studios 55-minute prequel original video animation, Zone of Enders 2167 Idolo, and later a 26-episode series under the name Z.O.E. Dolores I. Even later on, both games got their own remasters in the 2012 HD collection, which came to PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360s, and then again the Second Runner title got a 2018 4K remaster with VR capability called Mars. Except the A is upside down, so it kinda looks like a V, with the R in Mars coming after it there. That's pretty clever, Konami. That's a good one. Now, the first Z.O.E. game here is the one I'll be talking about today, and it was developed by Konami Computer Entertainment Japan, under the production of a man that needs little introduction, world famous for voicing the Japanese dub of Paul Mulbrandt in Zootopia 2. Just kidding, he's famous for Metal Gear Solid. The behemoth Hideo Kojima. Another name to note here is Yoji Shinkawa, an artist whose work in character and mech design spans between the Metal Gear Solids through the Zones of Enders, and even into the contemporary Death Strandings. Real question to get down to though, does the Zone of the Enders hold up after 25 years for someone who's never experienced the franchise? And that person who never experienced the franchise would be me. I'm something of a newcomer into the mech world, but after a few experiences with these giant robots, I realized I want to have every experience and have made it something of a personal mission to play every single mecha game ever made. This YouTube channel I use to record my thoughts about these games, the mech designs, upcoming titles, and so on. If you'd like to keep up with this project, we'd love to see you click the subscribe button, or just stop by the comment section to give a shout out to your favorite mobile suit. Thanks, now let's get to the games. The plot begins sometime after humanity manages to colonize space, doing so not only on various planets of our solar system, but also in some very familiar-looking tubular space colony vessels. More specifically, the story starts in the year 2172. A space military force named Barum launches an attack on a Jupiter-based colony named Antilia, in an effort to collect some special mech suits called orbital frames. This battle seems to start at about the same time our main character, Leo Stenbuck, is being, horribly bullied? It seems his group of friends are all tied up by a light post and some older kid is menacingly taunting them. That is until this military operation, specifically caused by the Barum pilot Viola in her frame named Neath, causes another frame to topple over, crushing not only all of Leo's friends right in front of his eyes, but also essentially the entire world as he knows it. And then he runs off, obviously upset. Before I start to explain where he ends up, if you can't think too far ahead, it's in an orbital frame, I just want to take a moment to pay respects to his name, Leo Stenbuck. I don't know if this was a Japanese determined name or what a Western localizer went with. Of course, I did play the English version of the game, but the name strikes me as an attempt to sound like a Western name, but it also just doesn't. If that makes sense. A sort of mondegreen or pseudo-word. Alls I'm saying is Leo Stenbuck seems like it'd fit right in on the fighting baseball roster up next to Sleeve McDykel and Mike Truck. Funny name tangent over. Leo runs away in fear after witnessing his pals get crushed and sorta, kinda, maybe just falls into the pilot seat of one of these sought-after orbital frames. This one's got a Metatron-based artificial intelligence named ADA, or Ada. Here we start getting story cutscenes played out in the first person, from the perspective of Leo as he sits in the pilot seat. I kinda really love this. The gameplay is third person, of course, there are cinematics, but a lot of the storytelling in between missions is in this first person perspective with Ada. And I lied about the funny name tangent being over because Ada tells us this orbital frame is named Z.O.E, which is a funny sounding word to me. To dial it back a bit, there is some pretty solid ancient Egyptian mythology sprinkled in here with the orbital frame names. We do get to meet an Anubis later, and that's a name we probably all know the origin of. Viola's Neith is also an Egyptian deity. Z.O.E is pretty well known as well, actually, except we know him by the Greek's name, Thoth. I guess the correct Egyptian pronunciation, word, name has been lost through time, but it's speculated to be similar to this Z.O.E. How we went from Z.O.E to Thoth is a mystery for me. So shortly after booting up the Z.O.E and learning the controls, Leo starts getting transmissions from Elena Weinberg. This is a lady off the colony on a transport ship named Atlantis. The United Nations Space Force were meant to pick up Z.O.E and take it to Mars, but the real pilot has died and now Leo has to take his place. Unfortunately, Antillia is still heavily under siege and has gone into some sort of lockdown mode, which means we've got to jump through a bunch of hoops in order to take Z.O.E off the colony. And also Leo has very few proclivities toward self-preservation, as he spends a bunch of time here refusing to do things like fight and kill enemies. En route to escape, you'll also get a handful of rescue side missions to safeguard civilians, and notably we'll rescue Selvice Klein, who begins to ride around in the cockpit with us, sometimes chiming in with her opinions. We're to meet up with an Atlantis pilot who has made it into the colony by the name of Rock Thunderheart, but before that we're stopped by Viola. We beat her, but Leo's bleeding heart refuses to do her in, and this pacifistic tendency really bites him in the ass. When during the meetup with Rock Thunderheart, Viola manages to reappear and cackles madly while shooting Selvice. Ouch! At this point, Rock and the injured Selvice manage to escape, but Leo has to stay behind for revenge. Or because someone set us up the bomb and now the whole colony will explode unless somebody's got something to say about it. So, Mr. Stinbuck saves the day on the defusal situation before earning his first real kill when Viola is launched from Antillia into the disintegrating orbit of planet Jupiter. She does get a pretty good diatribe here, a long speech as she slowly sputters out, the full range of emotions and life spoken out as it flashes before her eyes, and then she dies.
At last, I can be with you. Viola!
Her boss, Nomen, suddenly appears in Z.O.E's significantly more powerful sister frame Anubis and absolutely kicks the crap out of you. This is kind of a wild end-boss to me because you can't win here. He beats you into the endgame cinematic where you have to make an escape onto the Atlantis. Also, Sylvie survives the gunshot. Credits roll. Now, a lot of the time I mention that mecha media subverts my expectations. I think as someone getting into the genre massively late, I had a lot of preconceived notions about what I expected from big robots fighting other big robots media. Initially, this was kickstarted several years back when I was feeling rather down about myself and was seeking a simple cartoon to watch about robots hitting each other for a sense of escapism. I turned on Robotech for the first time since very early childhood and was caught off guard by how much of it was seeming to be a pop star romance story, and I decided to blindly switch to Neon Genesis Evangelion instead, which of course ends up being a profound piece of art when viewed at the same time where you yourself are feeling exceptionally vulnerable. This expands further into things like Gundam if you're expecting a dumb kids robot battle show and go, whoa, there's a whole lot more hard sci-fi and political intrigue drama here than I ever expected. With all of that said, Zone of the Enders does kind of the opposite for me. It's okay. Maybe if I had played this much closer to its release time, I would have enjoyed it more. Maybe if I was younger in the target age demographic. I feel like mostly what it does is rehash ideas and concepts taken from the classics, mentally struggling young pilot that doesn't want to be a soldier, falling into the pilot's seat and then being the best, tube space colonies, funny-sounding mech names, esoteric and or religious veils, ace pilot enemy nemesis with selfish goals of fighting the main character over the mission at hand, and so on. I feel like the short length of the title makes it difficult for any or all of these plot themes to have significant time to develop for the intended payoff. It does seem that they tried very hard to present this not just as a third-person shooter game, but with this grand story as well. But pan-fried potatoes aren't necessarily more tasty as leftovers the next day. They're still okay, they're still good, and you're still going to eat them if you like pan-fried potatoes. Almost forgot to mention the game has multiple endings based upon your in-game performance, too. As per gameplay, one of the first things that is noticeable is that the control scheme is a bit funky. It's dated, it definitely feels like it was produced in a time where dual analog sticks were new and foreign concept that developers were unsure how to utilize. Because it was. In the latter half of the 90s and into the 2000s, analog sticks and controls were a new concept. We can take a peek at 1994's Ape Escape and see that in the case of dual sticks, one controlled movement while the other controlled the tools instead of the camera, as would be standard today. I think the console market didn't grab onto that sort of standardization until the mass popularity of Halo 1 in 2001. In Zone of Enders, one thumbstick controls your movement, but the camera is really more controlled by targeting. Oh, it's definitely still playable, but it feels off to modern standards. Besides the lack of camera controls, the rest of the layout is fine. You can put up shield and guard against attacks, do ranged or melee bursts, though the most fun thing for me to do was grapple and throw. You can grab your opponents before flinging them across the map into other enemies, and that's always a fun thing to do. I think part of the combat was inspired by fighting games because there seems to be a very clear back and forth hit and block sort of thing going on, especially in the case of Melee. But besides Melee and your standard ranged attack, there is also a wide range of sub-weapons. The aiming reticle seems hit or miss to me on whether or not it works as a good gauge, but thankfully a lot of these sub-weapon attacks happen in creative ways that work around this, like the Bounder that shoots straight up in the air after landing on the ground. There are standard weapons here too, like the sniper shot or the gauntlet, but also utilities like the mummy heal or the decoys. Some of these additional weapons work as a sort of required roadblock that keeps you from progressing. An example of this being that the decoy sub-weapon is required for a boss fight against Tyrant. This boss launches an unblockable attack that ends up being a one-shot on Jehudi until you manage to launch decoys to subvert it. There are some other boss battles here and there that I found really enjoyable, like the fight against Nebula, with its big, dangly sack. Something I didn't enjoy quite as much was the game's reliance on backtracking. This is already a very short game, but the frequent use of go replay a level you've already played again made its open choice map design feel much smaller than it could have. It makes sense in the case of side missions for the maps to be reissued for these civilian rescue missions, but the main plotline seemed to do this on a mandatory basis as well, and not just for alternative weapon retrieval. Particularly a good example of this is that there is a mission to turn off some satellites via underground generator that are blocking our way. There are 2 of these, so that's already essentially the same mission played twice, but once you get to the second underground tunnel to generator, it has a separate energy field shield blocking the way. We discover that the robots we've been blowing up the entire time are able to pass through this, so we need to hijack one and take it through to blow up the generator. In order to do this, we've got to backtrack various missions to get special keys and codes to unlock the ability to do this, and then also backtrack to find a proper bot to control and then go back to the underground tunnel that we were at to begin with to finally complete the objective. I can see what the intention was here to make the progress forward a bit of a puzzle, and I do appreciate this to an extent. The game is more than just an A to B path of hack and slash combat. My issue is really more so that the puzzle aspect of this really seems to boil down to randomly finding the correct passcodes either in map or on enemy, as there is not a whole lot of direction to guide you to any conclusion. My expectation isn't modern yellow paint or an arrow guiding me to the solution every time as much as some sort of logical backing, which seems to be lacking. The hint might as well be, it could be anywhere, anytime, randomly, go find it, and I don't really like feeling entirely directionless. On the audio-visual end of things, this one still holds up as it looks and sounds beautiful still. Of course, I was playing this emulated, that does mean I was seeing it upscaled, but regardless, I think the attention to detail and graphical fidelity, despite being low poly, still looks great. Every environment is interesting, the characters and set pieces are all incredibly identifiable by design, the atmosphere really feels like you are in the cold reaches of space, and it becomes pinpointed by the soundtrack. You've of course got the standard symphonic or orchestrated piano pieces for pivotal moments emotionally, but a large amount of sound here is very PlayStation sounding in the best way. You've got these darker, tuned, industrial techno-type sounds, chirping notes, and mechanized car squeals. There's some really cool atmospheric bits thrown into the jams that pull this world together, and I really enjoyed it. A lot of people point to the moment in Halo when you first land on the Halo and can see the skybox of the ring planet way off in the distance, but maybe I'll do you one better and point at the mission select screen in Z.O.E. It's not a menu, but an explorable map where you fly between different city blocks to your destination. I loved seeing this Gundam colony at night with all its twinkling city lights below. Phenomenal view. A refresher on things I didn't care too much for, extensive backtracking gameplay, a story that often feels a tropey tale, an aiming reticle that sucks, dated control schemes, the game being way too short. I didn't face any bugs or anything like that though, at all. Something I didn't bring up is that the game does present a leveling system, but either I just wasn't paying attention or this is not explained whatsoever. I do understand the concept that an enemy with a higher number level is going to be stronger. I understand that about my Jehudi itself, but I don't understand the inner workings of this, and it was a missed opportunity to not allow sub-weapons to be upgraded through this level up system. I feel like having a static reason to re-engage with this level up system would also have aided in the backtracking and side mission aspect, as it would have increased my motivation to replay this content in order to try new builds or continue leveling up even further. Another thing to note is that the game does have multiplayer, but is locked behind game completion. This is a stupid game design. I didn't get to play this versus mode, so I can't really comment on how it functions, but I do understand that it is locked to begin with. It would make sense to lock a New Game Plus mode, or a challenge mode, or something like that, but the basic 2-player versus mode seems like it would be extremely annoying if you actually wanted to play it. Bring the game to a friend's house for a sleepover, oops, you forgot your memory card, time to spend 5 hours on the single-player campaign before you and your buddy can battle. Generally, I enjoyed this one. It does feel a tad dated, but it wasn't extreme enough to turn me away. The game still feels good to play. It still looks good to see, and it still sounds great in my ears. Of course, it does come with a tropey story and a bit of annoying backtracking. Overall, its short length really kinda mitigates the bigger problems in its game design. I played through the entire thing over the course of a single day, and I think it was very worth my time to go back to and experience. So with all that said, thanks for tuning in. I think I'm gonna log off here and go check out the Zone of the Enders cartoon, and probably hit up that Mars sequel.